So yeah, in reference to the recent historical events that have happened, specifically COVID-19, it's important to understand what that pandemic did to the landscape of organizational psychology and work environments. So, because of the pandemic, companies and organizations needed to go from mostly in-person work environments to mostly remote work environments slash hybrid work environments. And in this transition, there was not much research out about the efficacy of the best practices within these positions and roles. And so research has been changing, and the landscape of research has been changing to understand how this position, a remote work position, can be best utilized by a company. And so companies have even started to dissolve in-person work environments and move their company solely to a remote slash virtual uh, position and company. And so with that transition, it's important for us to understand how to best support these companies and organizations. And so, um, for example, like yourselves, you guys are switching to predominantly virtual work meetings. And so within these work meetings, we suggest that you guys be considerate of communicating the best practices slash requirements, or maybe not requirements, but the best practices and the standards that you guys expect of your employees when attending these virtual work meetings. And so, for example, one thing that you can communicate from the get-go is that when you're in the meeting, your camera is on. There's no time that your camera should be off. For 30 to 45 minutes, we need to be communicating, collaborating, and taking in the important information that's being shared in these meetings. And if your camera's off, we don't know what you're doing. And so setting that standard from the beginning so that the employee doesn't get the wrong message. And it's important that you're setting the culture and communicating that culture. And if you don't communicate that culture and you get upset with an individual that's not abiding by those standards, it just creates a little bit of a tension. And so other things that we've seen is that some employees eat during meetings. Do you or do you not want that? As well as making sure that any microphone or camera issues are addressed before the meeting. So, um, on top of the virtual work meetings, it's important to make sure that your remote workers are well supported in these transitions. So some individuals, maybe their only social time throughout the week is a in-person work environment, and switching to a remote role, maybe they're not interacting with as many people. So making sure that they're supported by maybe peer groups that meet, or maybe there's a quarterly meeting that you guys do in person to make sure that you're able to meet with them in person, get to know them, make sure they feel valued, heard, and seen. It's important, and also just to fight against the potential isolation and loneliness that can be developed through these periods of switching to a remote position. Yes, so industrial organizational psychology has not always researched recruiting and recruitment and the processes behind it and the best practices, but the field has started to increasingly get more research and do more research in this area. One of the things that I would first suggest is to, one, communicate among yourselves about what is most important to you guys in terms of qualifications, and then two, making sure that you adequately communicate those qualifications and what the applicants need in order to obtain the position. So, for example, if you guys are looking to expand your psychology department, say you want to add on a specialization of industrial organizational psychology. If you wanted to do that, say you want the instructor to have a PhD in industrial organizational psychology. So, right from the get-go, you're saying this is the qualification that we've communicated as a management of the faculty or advisory board, and this is what we're looking for the position. So if they don't meet that qualification, boom, you've already weeded out a lot of different applicants, because in the field of psychology, there is an increasing number of different specializations. And if you already don't want to consider them, make that communicated so that you are only having people in that specific field that you would like to teach the course. So that's one of the first things I would recommend, is just having those communicated properly. Another that I think is important to consider is to make sure that the applicant is a good fit within the culture that has already been established within the university. So what I mean by that is, if you are a if you're a university that is a faith-based university, you guys have been a faith-based university since the beginning. Make sure that's communicated to your, if that's important to you guys, make sure that's communicated to the applicants, because if you have an atheist coming into your university to teach courses, maybe the principles and the values that the university holds are going to be different from the professor that you guys are bringing in, and that can create conflict, and maybe it'll create some tension within the hired applicant, that maybe they won't want to stay at the university too long because of the differing values. So making sure that you guys communicate that. How do you guys communicate that? One, that can be communicated in the interview process, asking questions that may be specifically oriented to their faith. Another way is to making sure that if that is a value you guys have, putting it on the open resources like websites, like brochures, to overly communicate, hey, this is what we value. And if you don't value this, okay, great. But we are going to move in different directions because of what we value. Yes, this is a great question that a lot of industrial organizational psychologists are trying to answer and help tackle for organizations. All organizations want to retain their high performers. And so how do you best do that? One of the best ways is to create a work family conducive environment. And that reduces the tension that an individual feels in general, because these two areas, they are interconnected. For example, if you're having problems at home, there's a good chance that they might bleed into your work. And vice versa. If you're having a hard time with work, say that the demands of work keep piling up, you might stay later. And if you stay later, that's going to bleed into your relationship with your family and your spouse. And so, how do you combat that? What are some things we can do? Well, basically, in what I just explained, work family conflict is, it's where one domain is interfering in a negative way with the other. And so, one thing that we suggest, and I'll give one for both men and women. So if there's a mom within your organization, making sure that she feels well supported is super important. What are some ways to do that? One, you can offer daycare services within the organization. That's one way we found, where mothers are able to just bring their child straight to work. They don't have to worry about driving them somewhere and then coming to work. It can really reduce some conflict. On top of that, we suggest that giving a good supportive period of maternity leave for when women have a child. The things that they have to go through are very difficult, and so we want them to feel well supported as they recover, as they get to mother their child that they just brought into the world. So making sure that they feel loved and supported it's super important, and some companies do not do a good job of that. And I feel for a lot of mothers who come straight into motherhood and they don't feel supported, it's going to be a big deterrent for not wanting to stay within the company. And so I suggest having that. Yeah, I'd say those are the big ones for women. For fathers, I think having paternity leave can be a really big can be a very big help to the family and help reduce conflict, especially for first time parents who are navigating how to be parents in general. Having that space where you give them a few months to figure that out together, what's the dynamic going to look like moving forward, so that they can support each other. That's giving them a good foundation to work forward on. So, and I think in all of these things, being conducive to families is important. Um, Children obviously have after school activities. They need to be picked up from school. They need to be this, that, the other. And so making sure that the work environment is not constricting, um, but helpful to families. But that doesn't mean you have to sacrifice productivity and creating boundaries and limitations of what that looks like, so that the company can move forward as well as the family can flourish. So yeah, in regards to organizational citizenship behaviors, those things are super important, and that message doesn't want to get or muddied, I guess you could say, because it is important to have people being brought into your organization, company, institution that have the same values and principles and moral character that you would want to be representing your company, organization, and institution. And so, with that, it is important to make sure that the employee and the applicant that you are considering is competent for the position. You don't want to have to coddle them through the position to make sure that they're doing the job right. You know, if this is going to be a senior position, for example, you want to make sure that the person coming in is able to come in and effectively do the job. Of course, there's going to be a socialization period where the individual is getting more acquainted to the specific culture, the specific routines that the company has, because every place is different, and it should be treated differently. And each employee should always have that support system that gets them integrated into the new work environment. But outside of that, if if say you want to hire a plumber and the person has no plumbing experience, that's going to be a competency problem, because say he goes to try and do a project and does it completely wrong, that's going to fall back on the company, and it's going to have repercussions for the long term. So looking at a position, this is for Old Dominion University, a posting for industrial and organizational psychology. um, the job posting looks great. It's got a lot of good things to weed out certain applicants that would not qualify for the position. Like one of the ones I mentioned earlier is they have a PhD with a concentration in industrial organizational psychology. That's a qualification. If you don't have that, I'm sorry, you're not going to be considered for the position. Clearly stating the qualifications is important. Having strong and successful graduate and undergraduate teaching and mentoring record, that's important. Having prior publications and peer-reviewed success is also important, because in a lot of university positions, university professors are going to be doing research on top of their teaching responsibilities. And so having proven success in that realm is important, right? Like if you have a trophy, or if you've won things, like that's a good sign that you do your job well. And so that's somebody you guys want to bring on to the team. One of the things that I would say that could potentially be better with this application is just maybe doing a better job of getting them acquainted maybe with the culture of what Old Dominion University is like, and providing them resources within the application itself to understand what they're getting themselves into. You know, if if they don't have a clear understanding of the qualifications and responsibilities based off of the organizational citizenship behaviors, maybe there's going to be some differences that arise as a result of that. And so making sure that everything's overly communicated on the job application, I think it's an important thing, because it just gives the applicant something to consider when applying there, to make sure that the hiring company and the applicant are seeing eye to eye. Yes, addressing counterproductive work behaviors as quickly as possible. It's important. It's one of the big things that management always needs to be considerate of and address in a timely manner. So, without having any insight into the data, I'd say one of the potential possibilities is that there's a workplace culture that is creating a norm of leaving work early. If say maybe there's one or two bad eggs at the beginning that were participating in this behavior of leaving 30 minutes to an hour early, if they saw that there's no consequences associated with leaving work early, why not leave work early? And so that can create a norm of saying like, well, if those guys do it, maybe I'll do it one day a week, and over time maybe more employees started to participate in that behavior. Not to mention that new employees coming in, if they see that culture, they're going to probably participate in that culture. And so addressing that culture and that norm is going to be important moving forward. One of the ways that I suggest addressing that workplace culture and norm is to assign management that responsibility, maybe lower ranking management down the ranks. And how do they do that in a way that's not too much on their workload? Maybe specifically for this problem that you guys are having, it would make sense for management to be there for the first like 30 minutes of the day and then the final 30 minutes of the day to make sure that employees are coming in on time. And maybe another way to do that is to make sure they're clocking in and clocking out. And so if a employer is there to monitor that, you bet that the employee is going to be like, oh gosh, I can't get away with this, and I need to make sure that I'm doing that. And maybe at first, like, it's an everyday thing for the management person to make sure that these behaviors are being followed. And over time, maybe it's just a random check-in to where the employees, they know that they're being monitored in this way, and if they don't participate and continue to participate and management comes in and you're not there, there's going to be repercussions and consequences for those behaviors. And so I think that would be a good way to do that as well as timestamps. So and the reality of it is that some employees are just not good employees, and they're going to participate in these type of behaviors wherever they go, and that's something that management needs to handle accordingly. They don't want to allow these things to continue to happen, and so that's when maybe firing and moving in different directions may be something to consider to help establish this strong workplace culture of making sure that the policies and the rules that you guys set are being followed.